In this lecture, we're going to learn about variables and data types in C++. What is a variable? A variable is a container box for your data when you are writing your program. But to make it easy to explain these things, let's head to Qt Creator and create a demo program we're going to use to explain. Okay, so here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to create a new project. C++ console application like we've been doing before. We're going to call it 1.6 data types. We're going to store it in the usual location. You can choose yours. We're going to hit next. Choose your kit and finish to have our program generated. We're going to get rid of this C outline and we're going to define a string. And because we're going to use strings, we're going to have to import the string class like this. We've done this before. The first thing we want to do is to define two variables. The first one is going to be a string and it's going to say hello, and the value is going to be hello world. The second one is going to be an integer. An integer is really a number in programming languages, so we're going to say int count. The variable name is count. We're going to assign a value to it and we're going to give it a value of 7. After we define this, we're going to output these values. We're going to say cout. The message is, you've seen me do this before, hello. Okay, and we're going to output the number. I'm going to say cout. The count is count. If we run the application, you can guess what we're going to see. We're going to see a message saying the message is whatever is stored in hello, which happens to be hello world. And it's going to say the count is the value that is stored in the count variable. Let's run the application. If we look at the compile output, we're going to see the compile process of our application. And you see that it is what we expect. The message is hello world and the count is 7. So what is happening here? When we say string hello equals hello world like this, we actually are taking the hello world string and storing it in a variable like shown here. And when we say string hello, we're telling the compiler to reserve storage space for us to store this hello world string. You can think that there's a good number of boxes in computer's memory, and you can ask the computer to reserve space for you to store a variable by using declarations like this: string hello, integer, count. And on the second line, we are doing the same thing. We are asking the computer to reserve space to store our variable, and we're going to refer to our variable using the name count. We are storing the value 7 in a variable that is called count. And you can see that these storage spaces have a type. This is because C++ is a statically typed language. You have to define the type for the variable. So now that we've done this, a variable is really a box where you store data in memory. The data type defines what kind of data can be stored in that box. And C++ type must be defined before you use them. You see as define a string hello. You cannot say hello equals hello world. The compiler is not going to know what you are trying to store. So you have to specify the type. And what you see here is really what we're going to be doing all over again. We're going to type the type we want to store. We give the variable a name and we assign a value like this. So when you see a statement like string hello equals hello world, what really helps much is to kind of look at it from the right and think that we are taking hello world and storing it in hello. And you see in the drawing here, we try and make that clear. We are taking the value and putting it into the box that we have prepared in memory. I hope this makes sense. C++ can also let you define your own types using constructs like class and structure. We're going to look at the class later in the course, but they are just ways to let you define your own types. You've seen us use a string. String is a predefined class in C++, but you can define your own classes, and we're going to do that in a few videos. Looking here, string is an abstract type that is already defined in C++. We can use it to store string variables. You see a primitive type of integer, and on the right here, you see user-defined types that you can define. You can define a class to store countries. You can define a class to store cities, and they really work the same way. These types represent boxes in memory to store that variable of yours. And by now, I hope you have a clear picture of what a data type is and what a variable is. A variable is really this box in memory that stores your data. And the data type is the type of data that goes into that box. Okay, now I'd like us to look at the built-in types that are available in C++. We have an int, which stores integers. And on the compiler that I am using right now, the size is 4 bytes. And I specify the compiler because this size may differ depending on the compiler and the platform you are using. So be careful with these things. The size here is the amount of space that this occupies in your computer's memory. We have another type that is called char. Some people also call it char. It is 1 byte. It is used to store characters, but you can also store numbers in here. We have bool values, booleans, which are used to store logical values. And you can store in things like true and false. We have float variables, which are used to store fractional numbers with dots, things like 1.702 and things like that. We also have a double variable. The size is 4 bytes and it stores double precision floating points. And it's also used to store decimals. We have a wchar-t, which is used to store wide characters. If you need a character that has too much space, you should use this variable. But int, char, bool, float, and double are really what you're going to be using for most of the time. So now that we've seen these, I'd like to show you a way you can know the size of these variables on your computer. Let's head to Qt Creator and do that. Okay, so here we are in Qt Creator. The way you show the size of a variable, you use a method called sizeOf, and inside you pass in the data type that you want to see the size for. Okay, so right now we are saying the size of an integer is this thing, bytes, and it's going to show us the size on this particular computer and this particular compiler that we are using. We're going to do the same for the other data types that we just looked at. We're going to say cout of char is size of char. Bytes. And I put a new line here. Okay, I'm going to copy this because I don't want to type this all over again. Test it a few times. So we have bool, we have float, we have double, and we have we should do this here too, so that this makes sense. Float, double, and wide character. So if we run the program, we're going to see the messages hello world, the count is 7, and we're going to see the sizes for these different data types. So run the application. And looking at this, you can see that on my computer, an integer is 4 bytes, a character is 1 byte, a boolean is 1 byte, a float is 4 bytes, double is 8 bytes, and while character is 2 bytes. This is how you see the size of the primitive data type on your computer. The next thing we want to look at is the type modifiers. So sometimes you want an integer to have a little bit more space in memory, or you want to shrink it down and make it occupy little space as possible. You do that using modifiers in C++. The modifiers that we have are signed, unsigned, short, and long. You use signed when you want your variable to be signed, and that is give it the ability to store negative and positive numbers. You use unsigned when you want it to be only positive. You use short when you want to shrink down the storage space in memory, and you use long to expand it, to have it occupy a little bit more space. And you can see all the effects of these modifiers here. For example, an integer normally stores 4 bytes. When you use a short modifier on an integer, the integer is going to store 2 bytes. When you make it unsigned short, it's going to store 2 bytes too, but it's going to be able to store only positive numbers. When you make an integer signed, it doesn't change anything on the amount of space it occupies in memory, but it makes it capable of storing both negative and positive numbers. And you can see that from the range here. It can store variables from minus 2 billion, I think, 2 billion something, up to plus 2 billion something. This is a really big number. You can also make it long, which really doesn't do anything in our case here. But on some platforms, this might increase the size in memory. When you make it long, it becomes 8 bytes. And if you make it unsigned, it only stores positive numbers. I hope this makes sense. And you are not supposed to memorize this table here. You can check it out whenever you need to know the size of your data type or the range of data that you can put in your variable. And if you want to learn more on this, you can visit this link here. They really have a good tutorial on how to use these things. Okay, now that we have looked at these modifiers, we should also look at them in the IDE and see their specific sizes, because you shouldn't take my word for it. You should try yourself and see these things. Okay, here we are in Qt Creator. We're going to go down a little bit and paste in a piece of code that I have prepared, because I don't want to type all these things. You can type if you want. So you see that we are trying to see the size of a short int. It's going to tell us unsigned short int. This is really what we had in that table. So if we run the application, we should be able to see these things. Okay, let's run it. Boom, this is a long list, but we can see this. Okay, so it starts on the top there. And let's look at the short int. Short int is 2 bytes. You can see this. Unsigned short is 2 bytes too. Unsigned int is 4 bytes. Int is 4 bytes. Signed int should be 4 bytes too. And you should be having this idea. Short and long affect the memory storage space. Short shrinks it, and long expands it when possible. Signed and unsigned really control whether your number can be negative or not. And to illustrate that, we're going to do something right now. We are going to define an unsigned integer. And the way we do that, using this unsigned int var1, we're going to call it var1, and we're going to store 200 inside and see out the value of this. Okay, we're going to say var1 is var1. We put a new line on this. So we kill our program first, run it again. We should see 200 outputted. Okay, so this is what we are seeing here. We are seeing var1 is 200. Let's think about this variable here. It is unsigned, so it shouldn't store negative numbers. A question you might ask, what could happen if I put in a negative number? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's try this, okay? So we're going to make it negative and put it in a variable that is not supposed to store negative numbers. Let's run the application. What do you expect to see? We're going to see in a moment. And you see that we have something that we never put in our variable. Look at this number, okay? And this hopefully shows the kind of errors that you might have if you're not careful with your variables. This is all I had to say in this lecture. I hope you know a little bit more about data types and variables and how you can use them in your C++ application. In the next lecture, we're going to look at control flow in your C++ applications. I see you there.